Hey, welcome. Welcome to another live show. I believe this is episode 16. We have a very special guest with us this evening, someone from Bombay.
Somebody who I think a lot of runners, especially in Bombay, know and respect and look up to. He's well known in the coaching community as well as the running community. So we're very excited to be speaking to him about acing the 42K.
Yeah. 42K is a long way to go. But how's the week started for you guys? It's Tuesday. It's another week. We're on 12th, so another 5 days for the lockdown to end. It may get extended. Who knows?
I think it's getting extended, but let's see.
All right, so let me quickly introduce Coach Dan. Along with a long list of certifications, Coach Dan is a certified strength and conditioning specialist from the National Strength and Conditioning Association in the US. He's completed over 43 full marathons, 2 ultra marathons. He's run Berlin in 2007 and 17, and he's raced in Switzerland, Istanbul, Scotland, and Hungary, and of course, India. Daniel Vaz is the head coach with the Nike Run Club India since 2008, so well over a decade. And he can be seen passionately nurturing young talent on the road or track of Mumbai in the early hours of the morning. So without further ado, let me welcome Coach Dan to the show. Good evening.
Hi guys. Good evening to you guys.
Good evening.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you. Managing in this period of being homebound, but it's not been so bad. Let's hope we get to go outdoors very soon.
Yeah, very soon. I'm sure you're eager to get back to the track and to your students whom you coach and you train. Have they been bugging you for home workouts instead of track sessions?
Yep, we've been doing quite a few home-based workouts that I have structured and designed for them. A lot of it simulating running specific functional movements, and I've shared it with not only my own core group, but I've shared it with a lot of the other runners who are on Facebook. And it's been nice. It's been a little popular with all of them, because some of them are workouts which last between 1 hour, 45 minutes and 2 hours, and it makes them feel like they've done a long run. And it's not just all strength, it's a lot of running gait, using a jump rope so that you get an endurance adaptation, and all sorts of things, including core work and leg workouts and things like that. So I put in about 8 to 10 such workouts, and they've been quite well received, I should say. Thanks to my runners.
Yeah.
They sound quite intense.
Yeah. I was gonna say the heart and the lungs don't really know, right, the difference, because if you're doing a high intensity session, then you're working them out. But then you mentioned that you've also been giving them a lot of leg work, so I guess they're getting the best of both.
Yes, more than the leg workout in terms of strength, it's the functional movements pertaining to running gait which are structured within the workout. So they do a lot of high knees, they do a lot of high knee skips, they do butt flicks and stiff-legged shuffles. All of this is going to work up their heart rates and still keep functionally the running muscles moving. So I think when they step out on the road on an outdoor run, it's not going to be so bad or so difficult in terms of muscle memory, remembering how a run feels, kind of thing.
Yeah. Also, working in the drills, I know a lot of us don't get a chance to do drills because when we're out running, we just want to run. But I guess this is a good opportunity to do your high knees and butt kicks and get some drills in. Nice. I think that's something we can work in as well into our week. Thanks for the tip. Yeah.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Coach, coming to running. Everyone in Bombay knows you as Coach Dan. Everyone knows you as someone who loves the sport, who knows a lot about the sport, both from a training perspective, also a nutrition perspective, also a rehab perspective. But what about you as a runner? When did your journey really begin here as far as running is concerned?
Okay, it began quite a while back. A friend of mine had introduced me to the Pune International Marathon, and you know that is way back. So it's about 25 years back when he just told me that there is something like a 42-kilometer race, and I just actually looked up at him and thought he was joking. So we went off to Pune, and it was a race largely meant for elites, and it had a very small field, a few foreigners, and the army and the defense force guys, comprising maybe about 25 runners, and then there were a few recreational runners who used to hang around, and they had to the 42 kilometers was for the men, and the half marathon was for the women. So actually there was a kind of a cutoff point at the half marathon, the 21-kilometer distance, and we both decided that let's try and struggle and somehow reach that half marathon point. And that was, as I told you, sometime in 1995, and the race started, and we struggled, and I was a footballer, so it was not so bad. We reached the 21-kilometer mark. You couldn't do the 42 kilometers unless you met their cutoff criteria, which was pretty stiff. They wanted 28 kilometers in 2 hours. So you can in 2 hours, and they really limited the field so that they didn't have to, obviously in 1995, keep 8 stations open for hours together. But it was fun, and that was my first taste of what a full marathon is. And you know that even for the next 9 years, the sport really didn't turn up until 2004, when Standard Chartered introduced it to the running fraternity. And between 95 and 2004, I began training just as a recreational runner out of just interest. And there were no races. You know that there were no races at that time. There was just the Thane marathon happening in Mumbai, which was in July, and there was a Pune International Marathon happening. And so I used to do the Thane marathon because that didn't have really cutoffs and things like that. And around the corner, Salgaonkar Sports Club came, and they held a full marathon in Goa. So the field was only 27 runners, and only 12 completed the race, and I was the last guy to actually come through. Yeah. And so 27 runners starting at Benaulium Beach in Goa in 2002 January, and for 27 runners they had 6 ambulances tracking them. So you were spoiled, kind of thing. But that was the time when the sport was not known recreationally, so to say. So I managed to learn all of that well before the first Mumbai Marathon actually turned around the corner.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, even though in those years the sport was still in its infancy, even or pre-infancy, pre-birth, so to say, 27 runners and 6 ambulances. I think although we've progressed so much to where we are today with thousands and thousands of runners, maybe 30,000-40,000 overall in the Mumbai Marathon, I'm sure people would take to run a marathon with just 27 runners because it's so peaceful. It would be such a beautiful experience to just have so few people running on the road. Wow. So you've, like you said, you've been in pre-birth stage, embryo stage, I guess, 20, 30 people in a race, to 30,000, 40,000 at a race today in Mumbai. How have things changed? How have training methods evolved over the time? Specifically for someone who's coaching athletes, who's being coached, what kind of training systems did you have access to back then, and how has it evolved today?
Okay, so I had to do this by feel, in the sense that my first book was by Bruce Tullo. a very elite runner in the late 60s and 70s, and he had written a book on marathon training. And there wasn't that much information available on the net between 95 and 2000 in terms of the kind of information you have now. So I had access to Bruce Tullow's book. Unfortunately, it was for elites, but I could glean some things out of it and understood what are slow distances, moderate runs, fast runs, speed workouts, and things like that. And I used to use those in whatever way I could assimilate or understand those things when I was running in Bombay. And I was staying at Lokhandwala in those days, and there was a back road there which was about half a kilometer long. So it was good enough for me to run back and forth and put in, whatever kind of distances I wanted, 16K, 17K, stuff like that. And sometimes on a Sunday, I used to actually go from Lokhandwala right up to Andheri station, loop around all around Veera Desai Road and things like that, and come back. And I used to get a distance of about 14, 15 kilometers. So those were the kind of experiments. And it was a lone ranger kind of thing, because most people didn't know what exactly I was doing. And it was causing a lot of consternation in the social fabric related to me, because I was a footballer and I was quite sinewy. And then I lost a lot of weight because of, endurance training will change your body frame, right from being a little bit of muscle to a lot of lean tissue. And you don't look so good compared to looking like a footballer. So I had to contend with those social issues too. But I learned along the way, and all these sort of impromptu training techniques. And then there was, of course, information coming in after 2000 on Runner's World and stuff like that. And I had more access to it. But I had to learn, actually, because I got overtrained at one point of time. I had a few injuries because there was nobody you could turn to for those things. You just ran through them, sort of. Fortunately, I didn't have any major injuries, but I was on the Runners World forums, so I could easily interact with runners and get advice from them and stuff like that. And that's how the training began. So training now has evolved over the years with so many other runners who have genetically been predisposed to endurance. People have turned onto the marathon stage now in India, and they wouldn't have probably known that they are such good distance runners, and they turned out to be pretty good at the distance, and they learned the ropes. And there were, of course, people like Savio and Samson who were track athletes of yore, and I was interacting a lot with Savio D'Souza also at that point of time. So they had these methods which they have applied in their time, and they worked pretty well for runners. The whole training spectrum, so to say, has evolved. And then now you have so many coaches. And then we started about 5 years or 4 years back with the Exercise Science Academy, formally trying to teach runners how to become marathon coaches by giving them lectures in exercise physiology. And I'm a lecturer with them. And we lecture to them on exercise physiology, what is endurance, concepts of VO2 max, lactate build-up, and running economy, the nutrition part meant for endurance, biomechanics, running injuries, cardiovascular, aspects of screening athletes and things like that. So we sort of put in some kind of a structure available to people. And besides that, of course, people now have access to a lot of the training certifications available on the American Council on Exercise or the American College of Sports Medicine. So it's evolved right from learning the ropes by getting injured yourself to what it is today.
Yeah. There's a bit of a framework available, a blueprint. You have to do your long runs and your hills and your tempos and things like that. So,
and I think nowadays you have so many running clubs as well that you can join, and they also help you guide other runners and yourself to become better runners. So it's definitely evolved from 27 athletes running a 42K to now. I mean, on Sundays here in Bombay, hundreds of runners on the road.
Thousands, yeah.
True.
So you ran in 1995, which is the first marathon that you sort of ran. And then you said you were on the Running World forums. You were reading a lot about how to train. You were reading books. What got you hooked on to coaching?
Hooked onto
Coaching. When did you decide that you wanted to sort of go to the next level? And
okay, it actually just came to me. It fell in my lap because naturally when the first Mumbai marathon happened, and then progressively over the next 2 or 3 years, runners started turning up. People wanted to look out for somebody who's already done this and who probably knows how to handle a recreational runner. And in 2007 or 2008, Runners for Life had this page on the net, and there were a few runners from Bangalore. There were a few runners from Mumbai, one or two runners from Hyderabad, but it was a very small fraternity. And then it grew. By 2010, it grew to around almost 10,000 runners who were on this forum. And so through them, I got this sort of leads to different runners because they got to know about me and they turned up to me wanting to be coached. And then I thought to myself, if I'm going to do this, I better know this from first principles, or from a exercise physiology standpoint, rather than doing it just because I knew what is to be done. It's like, to put it, to give an analogy, it's either working as a motorcycle mechanic or an automobile engineer. Okay, as an automobile engineer, you know what causes things in the motorbike, but the auto mechanic just knows where to use the screwdriver and stuff like that. So that's how I ended up getting certified pretty early in 2007, and then progressively, of course, keeping up those certifications. And Nike came to me in 2008 to start the Run Club in Mumbai. And so since then, there's been no looking back in terms of the way it has built up.
Fantastic. Since today's chat is about the 42K, which is the full marathon, you've run over 40 marathons. You've coached athletes of various capabilities across distances. What are some common demons that marathon runners face?
Largely, it has to do with being able to stay injury-free. Okay, since the full marathon involves putting in mileages, and in order to run a decent full marathon without feeling the fatigue and excessive amount of pain towards the final stages of the full marathon, you have to actually put in a lot of time on your feet. And that challenge is something that can lead to overtraining. It can lead to injury. So those are the main concerns when you deal with runners, although many of them push themselves headlong into it without the advice of a coach. But when they work with a coach, these are the main concerns for all of us, because every runner will handle mileages in a very different fashion. There are some people who can handle 120 kilometers, 130, 140 kilometers a week, and some just cannot move beyond 80, 90 kilometers a week. Any attempt to do that, and they come down with fevers and colds and set back by 4 to 6 weeks and then start again. So that's the main concern.
You spoke about mileage towards the end. What is minimum mileage someone has to do on a weekly basis if they're training for a marathon?
For a full marathon, I would say the minimum mileage you require is between 75 and 80 kilometers a week. If you want to finish the race without feeling too much of fatigue and exhaustion, struggling in the last 6 kilometers, you need those kind of kilometers on your feet. It's not as if you cannot complete the 42-kilometer race if you do, let's say, 65 kilometers a week. You certainly can, but it sets you up for a lot of fatigue and pain, and you're better off. Let me put it this way: there is a predicted time for the full marathon, which is based on your 10K or the half marathon time. All right.
Yeah.
Now, seldom can a runner actually meet that time which is predicted. It looks nice to know that if you're doing a half marathon in 2 hours, you're supposed to be doing the full marathon in, let's say, 4:15. But seldom do you get that 4:15 if you're doing it in 2 hours. You are most likely to end up with a 4:30, based on the experience I have with handling so many runners. And what is it that can make you come closer to that 4:15 is nothing but mileage. You have to be able to handle enough exhaustion in training to be able to come prepared to the start line on race day and know that you've done it all, so you don't fear that exhaustion when it hits you.
And what is the training block? How long should it be ideally? Should it be 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? What do you recommend?
In terms of number of weeks, I would say that it depends on where you are. If you're doing your first full marathon, I'd say you need about 5 months to actually get into the game and make sure that you execute a full marathon, which is going to be a strong one for you as your first full marathon, one in which you don't really struggle. But if you've done the full marathon a couple of times before, then I'd say that you can work with anywhere between, say, 14 to 16 weeks as a kind of a very specific structured training program meant for the race that you are targeting or the goal that you are targeting. Depends on which is that marathon, because every marathon has different things to be tackled. Whether it's a Mumbai marathon, it's humidity and heat along with the pet road hill. If it's a Hyderabad marathon, it is a lot of hills. So you need to set the goal and then work backwards. I'd say 16 weeks is a good amount of time for you to structure the speed work, the base training, and then what we call as sharpening before you actually turn up for the race.
Yeah. So for a seasoned runner, by seasoned runner, I mean someone who's been running for a couple of years, who has a decent base, taking a 14, 16 week sort of approach towards a race is ideal, is what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
And you said
they need to and focus and build up mileage in those weeks.
And you said 5 months for someone who's running their first marathon. So I'm assuming that you mean someone who's already run a few half marathons before that, right?
That's correct. About at least 4 to 5 half marathons is what I tell runners who turn up. And then I tell them that, okay, it's time for you to look at the full marathon, but don't do it before that.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice, because I think a lot of the times we get so excited. Maybe we hear a friend that is doing a 42 and we're just like, oh, that sounds so great. And we sign up and we don't have the experience. We haven't really spent that much time on our feet, and we just sign up for it and we don't have a structured plan.
Yeah.
And we end up failing. I mean,
miserably.
You're basically crawling to the finish line and it's just a miserable sight.
It always happens. It's always peer pressure. Even in our circle, we run ultras. We're not that fast, but we enjoy running ultras. And when we're signing up for a race, the choice is either 80 kilometers or 100. And then you sign up for 80, and your friend's like, oh, but I'm doing 100. Come on, it's just 20 more K. What doesn't matter? And then the pressure's in, and then you switch. But no, I think that's good advice. Of course, coming from you. So I hope people follow it. It's difficult to follow, but you have to know. I think now, especially today, with all the information that we have, with the science, with the framework, it would be. I'm trying to think for a word. It would be unwise to not listen to this kind of advice. You're just putting yourself in a bad spot if you're not going to listen to it. So,
yes.
Yeah. Another question that I had for you was, we always hear, especially in the marathon distance, we always hear the phrase "hitting the wall." We don't hear it so much in a half marathon. We don't hear it so much in an ultra, but it's always in the 42K. I think we lost Coach Dan here. Let's give him a couple of minutes to resurface. How are you guys doing? What's happening? I see Gautam's here. Hey, Gautam. How are things in Hyderabad? Are you able to? I see that you're running. Are you running indoors or?
No, I see that he's running
outdoors.
Yeah. Outdoors.
Are you in a green zone, Gautam, or is it that Hyderabad's open? We'd love to know. It's good to see that you're back running, though.
Yeah. No, I think he's been pretty consistent. Also, I think that's great. Especially now that we're under a lockdown, so I think he has a little bit more time as well.
Yeah.
How's everybody else doing? Are anybody actually training specifically for a full marathon that you had planned for the year, or are you just kind of trying to maintain your fitness during this lockdown? We'd love to hear what you're doing at home, what types of exercises you're doing, what type of training you're doing. You can share some of that.
Yeah. Let us know what's keeping you busy at home, training at home, around the living room, around the kitchen.
Specifically for a full marathon.
So let me see.
For those of you that are in the chat, how many have actually ran a 42K?
Yeah.
Because
good question.
I personally have not ran an actual full marathon.
Yeah. So here's an example. Monica's run a number of half marathons, a number of ultras, but never run a full marathon.
I think it's high time that maybe next year or in the next couple of years I sign up for a 42K and train for it rather than just kind of say no. I'll just stick with an ultra. But I think it'll be fun to experience a 42K. I know it's going to be a lot different, but I think everybody once in their lifetime should experience running a full marathon.
Yeah,
it's very, very different.
Yeah.
Gautam
says Hyderabad is, where did it go? Under a red zone, running around the apartment 1K loops. That's not good, man. That's really bad for your legs. Be careful.
Hope you're going opposite ways every other loop, so that way you're not putting stress on just one side of the leg.
Yeah. Feels good to be back running. Just need a beer though. Yeah, same here, man. There's all the wine shops are closed, so we don't have access to good beer. But
again, another question. If you've ran a 42K, what's been your favorite full marathon experience? Many people love the Mumbai Marathon. Some people have a love-hate relationship with it. Some people love Hyderabad, even though that one seems to be a toughie.
Yeah.
It has, I think, how many bridges?
I don't know. Gautam's here. Gautam can tell us. He's run Hyderabad a few times. He's run Bombay as well. So, yeah. So Parag is here. He says he's done. There you are, Parag. 3 42Ks. Awesome. Which ones were there? Did you do Bombay? Did you do Hyderabad? Or did you do Bangalore, Delhi? Amit's here. He says, I've done 7.
Wow.
Jeez. You guys are
veterans.
Yeah.
Gautam, I meant running in the lanes around the apartment, not inside the apartment.
That's good.
That's
better. It's better than running indoors.
Yeah,
okay.
You're getting some fresh air.
There was a power outage.
Hey, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, wow. Welcome back. Okay, where were we? It's a little uncanny, right? I talk about hitting the wall and you suddenly disappear. It's like you hit the wall. But no, let me ask the question again. So yeah, hitting the wall. We don't hear it so much for the half marathon distance or for an ultra, but we do hear it a lot, of course, for marathons. So what does it mean? What can we do in training to sort of prepare for it, avoid it?
Yeah. Okay. So it has to do with the fact that in order to run the full marathon distance, you have a limited amount of carbohydrate stores in your body, and the body can store this limited amount, and you have to use it very judiciously in terms of executing the full marathon. And it applies to everyone, even to the elites. You have to have some external source of carbohydrate in order to be able to complete that distance at a good intensity. So it's like this. When you run the full marathon, you're running it at a certain intensity. At that intensity, it means that your body is going to be using carbohydrate as a fuel. All right.
Yeah.
Now, when it uses this fuel, it depletes it naturally, like petrol in a gas tank. It will deplete it. So unless you are replenishing that stock or the store of glycogen, as we call it, that's the storage form of carbohydrate in the body. You are going to exhaust the supply of carbohydrate. Now the body has the only option is to switch to a source of burning fat, which is available in copious quantities in the body. So when the body switches from using carbohydrate to using fat, there is a difference in the intensity, because fat metabolism is a slower form of energy, let's say, creation. Okay, yeah, it takes its time because it needs a lot of oxygen in order to burn or metabolize, as we call it. So the switch from carbohydrate to fat metabolism will suddenly make your pace drop substantially, because you can run a good pace when you're burning carbohydrate. If you're running fat, your pace has to drop. It's the law of bioenergetics. Okay. Whenever you're running, whenever you're utilizing fat as a source, the intensity has to be lowered. So that's the point at which a runner feels a sudden amount of brakes being applied to his body, and he or she slows down substantially. So this particular point in the race at which you exhaust your carbohydrate stores and you are substantially switching to fat metabolism is called the phenomenon of hitting the wall, because your pace drops substantially. And it can affect people in different ways. To very seasoned runners who still are prone to hitting the wall if they have judged their goal pace wrongly, they will feel a sudden slowdown, but they will still complete the race in good shape. But if, let's say, you're a first time or somebody doing the full marathon for the first 2 or 3 times, and you haven't really understood this particular aspect, executing in terms of the race, the full marathon is more an art than a science. You really have to get a fix on what kind of pace you can hold in the full marathon. So if you get this wrong, and for a beginner, it can mean even walking the last 4 or 5 kilometers in the race. So you've been running comfortably, up to say 36, 37 kilometers, and then suddenly you feel like there's lead being pumped into your veins, and your legs feel heavy, and you come to almost a grinding halt and have to walk the rest of the distance. That can happen to people who have horribly misjudged their execution of the full marathon in terms of the pace they need to hold. So what I'm getting at is that in order to execute the full marathon, you need to actually know very clearly what is the pace at which you should be running it. And that pace you can figure out by doing, let's say, specific long runs in your training. If you don't do that and you turn up at the start line, it can go horribly wrong for you. So that phenomenon is called hitting the wall, where you exhaust your carbohydrate stores.
I just have a question. How is it that it magically appears between the 30 and sort of 32, 35K point? Is it because people's long runs are usually 30K and they don't go beyond that too much in training?
No, it is because the amount of carbohydrate stores that you have would, when you figure out the intensity and put it in these equations, in terms of figuring out at what point in the race would you exhaust your carbohydrate stores, you can actually mathematically calculate this, because there are bioenergetic equations, and you can assume that you are running at a certain intensity. Intensity is defined mathematically too. And when you put that in the equation, you would find that if you ran at this pace, I would hit the wall at 28. If I ran slower, I would hit it at 34. If I ran even slower, I would complete the full marathon without hitting the wall. So everything is dependent upon the pace that you run. Pace is intensity. Okay, how hard you want to really hit that race and move for a target time. So that's why using a target time in the full marathon is something that you have to be very careful about. You just can't turn up at the start line and say that I want to do a 340 today. Okay, you have to know what happened to you with a 340 pace in the long runs in training, and also you have to simulate things because if you've been running in Delhi, let's say in the winters, and you've been using a certain pace, but you turn up in Mumbai to run the Mumbai marathon, the temperature is about 7 to 8 degrees higher even at the start line. Okay, and the pace you hold in Delhi cannot apply to the pace you would hold in Mumbai. So a lot of runners who don't know this and who haven't worked closely with a coach are very surprised and shocked when things happen to them somewhere along the way. And this can also set you up, other than actually hitting the wall and slowing down, it can set you up for a cramp too, because getting the pace horribly wrong can also set you up for cramps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's. I think a lot of runners, or we don't really pay attention to, what pace are we really running now? What is the pace that we want to run during a full marathon? I think a lot of the time you just kind of pay attention to the distance rather than the actual pace. And I think that's when people are not replenishing their glycogen stores throughout the run. So eventually the tank gives up.
Yeah. But you're speaking about pace. That's one thing that all of us always want to improve, whether we're running a 10K or an ultra marathon. Everyone wants to run faster. Everyone, even though we say run for the joy of running, the minute the race starts, you get competitive and you want to get a better time. What is one workout in the week that you recommend every runner should do that can help them improve their pace?
Okay, for the full marathon, that workout is actually your what we call as your lactate threshold pace. So the lactate threshold pace you have to figure out from tables available on the net. So if you put in your realistic or rather what you've achieved half marathon or 10K time in those tables, it would throw up as to what should be your lactate threshold pace or what should be your pace for the intervals, which are a lot more harsh. But the lactate threshold pace is the one that if you practice it, there is a good likelihood that you would be able to move closer to your goal marathon pace. Simply because blood lactate is a compound that enters your bloodstream, and being able to tackle that blood lactate in your legs is something you have to work in training. And the closer you are to actually getting that lactate threshold pace, the more likely you are to actually handle the full marathon pace which you have set for yourself. So lactate threshold pace is the right way to go. Definitely every week, one workout you have to do, hit the lactate threshold pace. There are ways to do it in terms of the long intervals, or to hold it for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And things like that.
Interesting. And then you said do this once a week. How many days a week would you recommend people run? 5 days a week, 6 days a week? Do you take a rest day? Do you do strength work? Do you throw in the strength work on a hard day or on a rest day?
Well, the number of days that you would want to put in differs from runner to runner in terms of the kind of mileage that they want to put in, or they are able to put in, because a lot of the recreational runners have many other professional commitments in terms of work that they need to wrap up their runs and go to work. So I would say if you want to tackle the full marathon, 5 days a week is really a must. Otherwise, you cannot put in the requisite amount of mileage, assuming that you're allocating about 75 minutes to 90 minutes to a particular workout midweek. Weekends, people are flexible. They need to put their long runs, so they know that they have to run 2.5, 3.5, or 4 hours and things like that. So this is what you need to understand, that you need to put in 5 days minimum. You have to take a rest day. Monday should be a rest day. Definitely, because most people would work with a long run on a Sunday, or even maybe back-to-back runs on Saturday as well as Sunday being the weekend for them. As far as strength training is concerned, the closer you are to your race in the, let's say, the sharpening period, it's a good idea to back away from strength training. You should certainly do it in what we call as in the periodization program. Periodization program is taking it in phases. You first start with base training where you build up volume and mileage. Then you incorporate speed work. Then you incorporate what we call as sharpening, in which you do specific workouts meant only for your full marathon race. It can be pertaining to the kind of course you're going to be running. If it's a hilly course, you'll do long runs using hills and inclines and things like that. If it's going to be a warm weather race, you're probably going to want to wear 2 or 3 pieces of apparel to simulate higher body temperatures for yourself. So sharpening is the time when you do all of this. And then there is, of course, the taper. So the strength training can be done in the base training phase, and it can be done in the speed training phase. As soon as you come to the sharpening phase, you could back off from it if you really want to give everything you've got to the full marathon. But if you do it, then of course you have to make sure that strength training takes a backseat. You are using it as a kind of a cross training day. So you can't go heavy with legs in the gym. You can't use a barbell that's loaded and try to really hammer your quads and hamstrings and things like that. So you need to make sure that the strength training day is a day for you to enjoy yourself by way of cross training and recover from the workouts that you've been doing all week long.
And then do you recommend releases or massages just to open up the body? Is that something you recommend?
Yes, it's a good idea to use a full body massage. You don't really need to have a technically speaking myofascial release kind of a massage, which can be a lot more expensive. But the regular, superficial massages that you get in the gym from people who are not really qualified physiotherapists, but they can really handle your body in terms of ensuring that they're using a good oil to massage your legs. It works for you because it'll open up your muscles and allow a lot more blood flow in those muscles, and metabolic waste can be removed from them. You feel a lot more relaxed. Do the massage, sit in the steam room, and I think you're going to recover a lot faster.
Yeah, I think the only word for that is jumpy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking about recovering, how long should a runner wait before they finished one marathon? How long should they wait for their next marathon? Should there be what is the ideal gap between one marathon and the next?
Okay, I typically tell people that they should target between 2 and 3 full marathons in a year, not more than that. And this is simply because if you're going to be tackling a full marathon, you might as well tackle it with a goal in mind in terms of how you want to execute the race. Having said that, it's not impossible for somebody to run a marathon every month, but you would be nowhere when it comes to your training, because running a marathon every month means that you're not really giving time to structured training. You've trained for 3 weeks, you run a marathon, you need to recover 1 week or 15 days for it, and then you go and run another one. So there is no meaningful training schedule that you're going to be following. But if you do space them out one every 4 months, then you have some chance of putting in a structured training schedule for yourself and having a goal to finish that race. Otherwise, you're just going to be running for the sake of it, and then as long as you know that you're going to get nothing out of it, it's fine. But if you're going to be running with a structure, 3 marathons in a year is the right way to go.
Awesome. We have a lot of questions coming into the chat room, so I'm going to start pulling some of these in. And yeah, guys, those who are watching, if you have specific questions for Coach Dan relevant to training for a 42K, this is the time. Now is the time to ask them. All right, first up is Meron. He says, what should be the average pace for an amateur runner to complete a full marathon?
There is no well-defined pace for an amateur. You have to correlate it to your half marathon. I mean, assuming that you've done a half marathon, naturally I wouldn't advise you to do the full marathon without having done the half marathon. Now, if you've done the half marathon in, let's say, 2 hours, if you've done it in 2:15, if you've done it in 2:30, or you've done it in 2:45, you would have a predicted full marathon time. And the only way to find out what should be your average pace on race day is the data that will be thrown up by your long runs. When you do your long runs, which are between 30 and 35 kilometers, you would know as to what works for you during those long runs. And you would be doing somewhere between, let's say, 6 to 8 long runs, and out of them, maybe 3 of them would be between 32 and 35 kilometers. And if you've got your pace wrong in any of these long runs, it would tell on you, because you would be walking a lot of the final kilometers in those long runs, knowing that it has exhausted you, you ran out too fast. So the feedback system from your long runs is what would help you in being able to predict what can be your goal pace on race day.
Yep.
So don't do your long run. Make sure you put in the work.
Yeah. Gautam has a question. He says, what are the early indicators of overtraining, and any tips on working towards longevity in the sport?
Okay, overtraining, the first thing that a runner needs to do, and I always advise runners, is that you should measure your resting heart rate at least 3 to 4 times in a week. So the resting heart rate is measured on the radial artery on your wrist, or it is measured on what we call as the carotid artery on the neck. Now, you need to measure your resting heart rate. It's a very good indicator of your status of well-being. Okay, and you need to do that 3 times in a week all through your training. So let's assume, and when you work with numbers, it gives a person a better understanding of the whole thing. So you need to measure your heart rate manually. You don't need to use the chest strap. It is very discomforting to do that, because it has to be measured first thing in the morning and before you get out of bed. Because the moment you get out of bed, the resting heart rate will go up by 5 beats, which you don't want. So you've woken up, you put the bedside lamp on, and you just measure it manually for 1 whole minute. Don't measure it for 15 minutes and multiply by 4, because if you get 1 beat wrong, it will get multiplied by 4, and the error will be 4 beats. Okay, so instead of 60 beats per minute, you will get 64 beats per minute, or you might get 56 beats per minute. So measure it for a whole minute. When you keep this data with you in your logbook, and every runner should have a logbook, otherwise you won't know how many kilometers you've done, you won't know what you've done for a certain training period. With this data pertaining to the resting heart rate, if you are getting overtrained, you will get a signal from the resting heart rate. It will rise up. If you're already on the brink of overtraining, it will rise up by 15%. Okay. So if let's say your resting heart rate is 60, you will get something like 70 beats per minute, which is huge. If your resting heart rate was 60 and you are waking up in the mornings and finding that it's 70, and it should be consistently higher for you to know that you're moving into the overtraining zone. I say consistently high because there can be those one-off days when you've been sleep deprived, or you've had too much of travel, or you've got work stress. But consistently hitting 70 beats per minute for 2 or 3 weeks, you know that there is something going wrong, and that's one indicator. The second indicator is lingering exhaustion. Okay, when you are training, you will find that there have been suddenly a change in the amount of exhaustion you're feeling in your runs. Where in your weekly runs, you're not able to execute your speed workouts feeling fresh. You feel jaded. You can feel the heart rate is high in most of your speed workouts. It doesn't feel like what it used to earlier. So that's a clear indicator that there is something wrong. And as I say, this has to be consistent, because there can be days on which you are sleep deprived. You will have a higher heart rate in some of your speed workouts. If you've been traveling for 3 days and you've turned up and met the coach on the 4th day, naturally you've been exhausted because of your travel. So your speed workout is going to go south. But if for 2 weeks you have 4 speed workouts that really don't feel good, you're going to get data thrown up by this. So lingering exhaustion is the next one. And then there are several other indicators, but they are not so easy for you to identify them unless you've really honed your senses to understanding them. Like insomnia, it can be irritability, it can be loss of appetite, it can be losing weight, although you've been eating fine. So these are indicators which are other than the regular ones, but the two major ones are your resting heart rate and lingering exhaustion and higher heart rates in your runs.
I just have a follow-up question on that with the lingering exhaustion. What if someone's training? What if someone's an ultra runner and the weekly volume is considerably high? The hill sessions are every week. Long runs are pretty long. The speed, it's pretty intense. Wouldn't that lead to some lingering exhaustion during the day? And how do you differentiate between exhaustion due to overtraining and exhaustion due to intense training?
Yeah. So as I said, I gave you examples of only the speed workouts because they usually tell you information in terms of what you were doing earlier and what does it feel like now. You will have excessively high heart rates in those speed workouts compared to what they were earlier. In case you are trying to actually force the pace and meet it. Let's say you had a lactate threshold pace which is meant to be, let's say, 5:30. All right. 6 weeks back, 5:30 was a breeze. You did your coach gave you 1.5 or 3 kilometer repeats, and you needed to do them 3 to 4 times to get 12 kilometers worth of lactate threshold work. You've been doing fine. Suddenly, 4 to 6 weeks down the line, you find that it's a struggle to hit that 5:30 pace. That's when you get an indicator because your heart rate is quite high. Why is it so? Why am I struggling with my speed work? That's the thought that comes in your mind when you are on the brink of overtraining.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Well, make sure you keep a log. Make sure you're listening to your body and really start understanding what signals it's giving you, so you don't end up training and then getting an injury.
And then, do you recommend to always use a heart rate monitor for all the runs?
Well, it's not absolutely essential to use it as a way of scientific training, but it gives you a lot of information. So if you were to log your runs and keep your average heart rate for many of these runs, you would know what's happening to your log in terms of what heart rates it is reading out to you. Especially in your long runs, you know how you started out and what you ended up with in the long runs, what has been the average heart rate, what has been the max heart rate, things like that. So coming to this lingering exhaustion, you will find that the max heart rate, if you were wearing a heart rate monitor, and I'm talking about a chest strap, I'm not talking about the optical method which is used on the wrist, because it is erroneous. When the hand moves, it creates problems. Besides, the methodology is using an optical beam to go through your wrist, but the chest strap measures electrical activity, and you will find that your max heart rate turns out to be consistently too high, and you know there's something wrong in your runs, and that feedback comes to you. Other than this, there are, of course, you're being prone to a lot of colds and coughs. This happens with a lot of runners. The moment they're getting overtrained, they will be down with a viral infection. They'll be down with a cough and cold. They will lose out a week to 10 days of training because of it. And if you're getting this repeatedly, you are moving in the overtraining zone.
Thank you. So Gautam, that's a very long answer for you, Gautam. I hope you grabbed all of that. Anushka is here. She says, how does one balance aerobic and anaerobic training?
Okay, they are domains which are pertaining to how you structure your entire training schedule. So the aerobic domain is the one where you're doing your easy runs, okay, and your long run. They are both aerobic in nature. You are going to be working, if I were to tell you, and the only guideline is to be able to tell you by way of heart rates. So if you're working with heart rates, then they are in the domain of around 70% of your heart rate, max heart rate, the aerobic run, 70 to 75%. The anaerobic domain comes when you are going to cross 90% of your max heart rate. And these are the ones that you use in your speed workouts. If you're doing intervals which are 400-meter repeats, if you're doing 800-meter repeats, if you're doing 1000-meter repeats at 95% of your heart rate max, this is a very stressful physiological stressor, so to say. And that's the one where you are moving in the anaerobic range. What is anaerobic? It means independent of oxygen. Aerobic is dependent on oxygen. So independent of oxygen, meaning the demands for intensity are so high that the body doesn't have enough time to metabolize using oxygen. It does it independent of oxygen. So your carbohydrate usage in the bioenergetics domain leans more towards burning carbohydrate without the presence of oxygen. And there is one domain in bioenergetics where your carbohydrate is utilized without oxygen present, and which is what is used by most of the runners when they do their 5,000 meters and 10,000 meter races. They work mostly in that domain where they are excessively burning carbohydrate, which is independent of oxygen. They will burn some portion which is with oxygen and some portion of fat, but predominant domain is where they use independent of oxygen.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, great. Badrinath is here. He says, hi, Monica. Hi, Amit. And hi, Badrinath. For anyone who is around 42 years old, is comfortable running 5 minutes a kilometer with 170, 196 heart rate zone. But when he has to run 140 to 160, the speed is dramatically lower. How does one address this? I'm not sure what the question is. If I'm assuming if you have to run between 140 to 160, you are going to be running much slower. So anyway, coach, yeah, maybe you can.
Yeah. So whenever you are, if you want, let's say the intent in this question is to target the heart rate. Now, if you're targeting the heart rate in the 140 beats per minute range, you cannot do that other than slowing down. Because if at 5 minutes per kilometer you were at 160 beats per minute, and if let's say you were going by heart rate training methods, then you have to slow down to something like 530 in order to come to 140 beats per minute. That's the only way I can address the question. You have to know from your question that you are addressing only the heart rate, because somebody has told you that you have to run, let's say, in this bandwidth of 140 to 145 or 140 to 150 beats per minute. If you have to do that, you have to actually consciously slow down. Otherwise, you won't come to that heart rate. If at 5 minutes per kilometer you were at 160, 170, you have to slow down. And this is what is used in the MAF training in case, and I'm only guessing, in case you are talking about the Maffetone method, then it forces you to slow down substantially and do your runs as a long, slow distance and keep your heart rate comfortable.
And I think only with time does your speed improve, and then your heart rate will also be much lower at a certain speed or at a certain pace. So it's all about consistency, and I think with time, if you're looking to be faster at a lower heart rate, that only comes with time and consistency.
Yes. Improvement in your pace at a certain heart rate will come only with time. So if you practice using the heart rate monitor at some point of time, 16 weeks down the line, at 160 beats per minute, you would probably be running a 445 if the adaptation is set in.
Yeah. Amit asked, how important is weekly mileage in marathon training? I think you've answered that already. And then he says, does run less, run faster work? Yeah, so that's interesting. Does run less, run faster work?
Yes. Okay. See, to answer this question, I would only, let's say, point you out towards the elites. Okay. If run less, run faster was to work for the elites, then they wouldn't be doing 250 kilometers a week. Okay. They would be happy doing 100 kilometers a week, putting in an excessive amount of speed work, and hoping that they can hit those times of 203 or 202. It just doesn't happen. In order for a physiological adaptation to take place, which is going to help you in the long run, you have to do nothing but specificity, as we call it. You have to run and run more. Okay,
Yeah.
so if you accumulate enough mileage, the distance doesn't become daunting. All of your physiological processes are in place. Your enzymatic activity, when we call it capillarization, which means that the number of capillaries that engulf your calf muscles, they will form a larger network than they had formed before. So everything falls in place if you specifically target higher mileages. When they say run less, run faster, it can work for people who are constrained for time and who want to execute a full marathon without reaching their potential. And that's the qualifying statement that I have to make. You will do the full marathon, you will run less, you will run faster, but you won't reach your potential full marathon time if you don't put the mileage.
Another question by Amit: Should we be doing our long runs fueled on an empty stomach, or
Okay. It's a good idea to do both. You must know that when you run on empty, you're going to be depleting your carbohydrate reserves, and that's a good thing for you in training, because you're going to be asking your body to dip into its fat stores and teach it fat metabolism, so that when the time comes for the body to actually dip into its fat stores, you don't slow down substantially than you would have otherwise. So running on empty teaches the body to handle fat metabolism a lot more, handle exhaustion of your glycogen. When you actually train with using enough carbohydrate in your runs, you also train it to do things where you start feeling faster in those runs, because there is adequate carbohydrate available for you. So both the domains can be tackled, and you would evolve into a better runner if you did that.
Would it be fair to say that if you're on just a very easy long run, you could do it, fasted? And if you're on a threshold run, or you have a workout within a run, so say the first 10K is easy, and then you're supposed to do 10K at marathon pace and finish with a 5K easy. That run you want to fuel so that you have.
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We call those variable pace runs. So the simple, straightforward long run going out for 35 kilometers can be done fasting. But if you had specific intervals in that long run, at which you're trying to keep your goal marathon pace, then it's a good idea to work with fuel sources.
Awesome. I'm going to grab just two more questions here. The first is from Santosh. He says, for a full marathon and an ultra, how many miles can we increase in the long run? Yeah, so I guess week after week, is there a percentage that?
So I would say that if you're a seasoned runner, you can jump in higher quantums, but the guideline given for you for the sake of safety is to use between 10 to 15% higher than the previous long run. So I typically, when I work with my runners, I try to increase the long runs by between 2 and 3 kilometer blocks. So if you've done 23, I get them to do a 26. If you've done 26, I get them to do a 29. So something like that. So these are the kind of jumps you can work with.
Yeah. And then I guess last question here from Rahil. Rahil says, negative, positive, or even splits. What strategy do you recommend and why? That's a great last question. Yeah.
Okay. Good question. So in order to do negative splits, as I said at the beginning of the program, you really have to know what you're getting into. When you are targeting negative splits, you are targeting to run the second half of the race faster than you did the first half of the race. And when we look at the question about hitting the wall, it seems like a paradox, okay? But you can do it, because, and this you can do only by checking things in training, and of course executing precisely on race day, getting your electrolytes in, getting your water in, getting your gels on time and things like that, you can do this. Having said that, the danger in the negative split is that if you get it wrong, then it can go quite wrong. For example, let's say you wanted to do a sub 4 hour full marathon and you wanted to do it with negative splits. Now, if the negative splits go wrong for you in terms of the pace that you held was just not meant for you, or you hadn't trained enough using that pace, or it was warmer on that day than you had predicted, then instead of a 4, you could as well end up with a 4:12 or a 4:15, which is huge for a runner who targeted a 4. Coming in 4:15 is an embarrassment. Let's be clear about it. So negative splits are a full-blooded attempt at giving everything you've got in the full marathon. You cross the finish line knowing I had nothing else left to give. That's a negative split. But executing it is an art. So I'd say that work with even splits. Somewhere around the 30-31 kilometer mark, take a call as to how you're feeling. If you're feeling fine, go ahead and increase the pace. You just might end up with a negative split. But don't go with the mindset that today I have to get negative splits. Decide on the negative split after 2/3 of the race is done.
Fantastic. There's one more question which I'm going to grab because it's on nutrition, which we haven't touched much upon. He says, can you comment on nutritional periodization for marathon training?
Okay, so there is, let's say, by and large, there's no nutrition periodization in the weeks that you train substantially, the base training, the speed training, the sharpening, except that you need to ensure that you get the right amount of carbohydrate and protein in your diet, which is in the case of the full marathon, anywhere from between 10 and 12 grams per kilogram of body weight is what is recommended. And when it comes to protein, it is close to around 2 grams per kilograms of body weight. For ultra runners, it can be up to 3 grams also per kilogram of body weight. But this is the requirement for you day in and day out. You need to make sure that you time your nutrition also. You need to make sure that you have your nutrition pre-run, during run, post-run. You have to ensure these things in order to make sure that not only your runs are well executed and you're on the dot when it comes to a structured training schedule, but you end up recovering well if you are taking this nutrition, timing this nutrition, so to say. There's a time window after every workout, which is around 30 minutes is the right time window. It can extend up to 45 minutes. Within this time window, if you take in carbohydrate and protein, within that 30-minute window, you are likely to be replenishing your carbohydrate stocks. You're likely to be getting the body back to equilibrium a lot faster, and you're likely to be recovering a lot faster because you fed your muscles on time. So use nutritional strategies like these. Use sources of nutrition to cater to this timing, depending on, because if you're going out for a long run, getting a protein and carbohydrate mix into for yourself within 30 minutes of finishing the long run is going to be a tall order unless you work with tailored nutrition. So you can use that. And yes, so having said that, I would say that there is a nutritional strategy when it comes to a protocol for carbo loading, but that happens around 4 to 5 days before the actual full marathon. And that's a strategy which is pertaining to changing the quantum of carbohydrate in your diet and going up to 70% of carbohydrate and cutting down on the oils, primarily the oils, keeping the protein content intact, and ensuring that you stock your glycogen stores and come well prepared at the start line of the race.
Yeah, the famous pre-race pasta.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
great. I think we've gotten a lot of great advice on how to train, how to make sure that we're getting the right nutrients, right nutrition for a 42K, especially if you're training especially hard and intense.
Yeah, I think that the talk has been very insightful personally for me as well. A lot of great tips from you. It's great to hear about your journey into running and into becoming a coach. And every question that the audience has thrown out, you've had a very solid, scientific answer to it, which is very refreshing because it's very easy to get advice in today's world from influencers or from the internet or Instagram or wherever. But it's very rare to get honest and true advice from someone who's gone through the process of, as you said, being a runner and being a coach, and not just being a mechanic but being an automobile engineer, because you are accredited, you have done the certification, and you're giving us sort of best of both worlds. So thank you for that. But before we let you go, we have a very short quick fire round for you. It's just some fun questions, and then we'll wrap up for the day, right? So
Okay.
First up, your preference, fartleks or tempo runs?
Fartleks.
Okay, interesting.
Hills
Very,
or
very unstructured workouts, but they're called, for that reason, they're called speed play, because they take the monotony out of a run.
Yeah. Is there a favorite session you have? Like, I don't know, 3 minutes, 2 minutes off, on and off, or
No. I build it up on the fly, which is exactly what you should do. Actually,
Yeah.
you look at a light electric pole in the distance. You say, "I'm going to reach there using my 5K pace." You see a
Yeah.
tree in the distance. You say that I'm going to go up to there at easy pace. Recover, hit another milestone, but keep it unstructured. That's a lot better for you.
Yeah.
Great. Hills or long runs?
Pardon me?
Hill training or long runs?
Long runs, because I'm not so good at hills.
Okay. This one may be easy though because of the topic for today. But would you prefer a half or a full?
I prefer a full.
You prefer a full.
Yeah, simply because it gives you a sense of satisfaction. You get beaten up quite a lot in the full, but it's a lot nicer. Not that the half is not a good distance. The half is a satisfying distance, but the full has so many variables and unknowns that tackling it makes you feel a lot satisfied at the end.
Yeah. You sort of it makes you feel like you've earned your food for the day, or maybe your beer for the day. So, yeah.
Track workouts or road runs?
I prefer to do track workouts. If I have access to a track, it's a very beautiful thing, because it works very precisely for you. It's a certified track. You know your 400s. You can measure your 800s. It's a good thing. And we have a good track available in Mumbai at Sai in Kandivali. So it's pretty good.
Yeah. Have you seen the new one that they've built in Bandra, just next to Leelavati?
No, not yet.
Okay. So whenever we're able to move around, that's something that's definitely worth looking into. It's beautiful. They've built it just adjacent to Leelavati. And from my understanding, it's not yet available for public use. But I think they're going to start opening it up to public. It's gorgeous. So it's definitely worth checking out for your Bandra sessions, because I know you do sessions in Bandra.
Yeah.
And then, the last question was your all-time favorite running workout.
Well, the running workout for me is the long run, because it's a lot less taxing for me compared to the week. You have to make sure that you've woken up on time, you're back home on time, you've done your breakfast, you get into the car, go to office. When it comes to the Sunday long run, you know that you can take things at your own pace. You can reach the national park or RA at a certain time, meet up with your friends, because the long run is about meeting up with friends and doing it as a group. Take it nice and easy, whether it's a 2.5, 3 hours or 3.5 hour run. You finish that, then there's the opportunity to go out for breakfast with your friends. So yes, the long run is something that I always look forward to, because I'm not under any stress to get home, so to say, to do something else.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, I would pick the long run as well. But for me, the long run is always bittersweet, because the bitter part is you have to wake up at 3 a.m.
Yes.
And sometimes, like, we go to the trails, so we drive out of Bombay at 4:30 in the morning to go and find a mountain. So we have to wake up really early, and you're just so cranky at that time. But then it's obviously very sweet because when you're done with 3 hours of running, you feel like you're on the top of the world. So yeah, it sort of summarizes, I guess, the sport in a very unique and beautiful way as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, Coach Dan, for taking the time to speak with us this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you and to learn so much about running from you. And yeah, thanks to everyone else for tuning in as well. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to the channel. We will be speaking with Kyron tomorrow on ultra running. I'm sure on trail running more specifically. I'm sure a lot of you know Kyron. He's a trail runner from India. He lives in Manali. He's run a lot of races across Europe, Spartathlon, UTMB, CCC, and various trail races in India. So he's up tomorrow. And then day after, we have Shibani Garat from Bombay. Everyone knows Shibani. She's been part of the Nike team as well, part of your group as well, I think, Coach Dan?
Yep.
Yeah. So she's going to be speaking with us day after tomorrow on training during a lockdown. Shibani is a very experienced runner. She's done lots of half marathons, full marathons, ultra marathons, 12-hour runs.
Yes.
So it'll be great to speak with both Kyron and Shibani. But for now, this is it. Everyone, take care.
Thank you.
Work at home. Be safe. Wash your hands. Enjoy mango season, and we'll see you all soon. Okay.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.